Hey there, welcome to the DFS build. I am Kevin Roberts, joined with Taylor Smith, and we're getting ready to break down the Week 6 Thursday Night Football Showdown slate over at DraftKings. This game is between the 49ers and the Seahawks in Seattle. Has a nice 49 game total and a 3.5 point spread. So logically, we can probably expect a close game with a decent amount of points. These teams are both kind of desperate. The 49ers have dropped to 2-3, and the Seahawks are now 3-2 after a 3-0 start. Somehow lost to the Giants last week. Maybe a bit of a hangover after losing to the Lions. Who knows? But if we look at the recent matchups between these teams, it's been all 49ers. They've won each of the last 5 games, and none of them have been close. So I don't know if we want to put too much stock in that, seeing as San Francisco is not really at full strength. Obviously, Christian McCaffrey not being there has changed how they operate on offense to a certain degree. So I'm going to ignore that personally. But yeah, we have a lot to be excited about just because there's a lot of good options here. Starting up top, we have Jordan Mason as the best projecting player of the slate. The ownership at Roto Grinders and probably everywhere you play or everywhere you build lineups, it's probably not current just yet on this Wednesday, but I would imagine Jordan Mason being the chalkiest captain option and the chalkiest flex play does make sense. So let's just start with him, Taylor. Do you feel good about being overweight on Jordan Mason overall, and on how you feel about him and the captain this week?
Yeah, it's hard to get away from him. I'm around even with what the field might be in terms of captain ownership on him. Just snaps are there. It's been a little bit down the last couple weeks. Garendo played a little bit more on Sunday, but not too concerned. I assume he's just going to continue to be the guy as long as McCaffrey's out. I don't love that he's not a huge pass catcher. Obviously, that matters in a PPR, but still getting to him a lot. Most trustworthy piece on the Niners side, but he's not my highest owned captain as of now.
Yeah, I think he's had 2 games in 5 weeks where he was very meh. He had 8 points last week and 10 points 3 weeks ago. The other 3 times he smashed with 20 plus fantasy points. So we know the actual rushing volume is going to be there. Like you said, not really reliable as a receiver. So that is a big difference as opposed to when C-Mac is in. But the Seahawks are bottom 8 against fantasy running backs as far as yardage allowed. And they have given up 4 touchdowns to running backs as well. So, I mean, Mason looks awesome here. I am just going to continue what I always do for showdowns. I'm going to get exposure to the chalk that makes sense, but maybe slide them to flex and try to get, different right away. So I don't know if Mason's going to actually be 35% on the captain slot, but I honestly wouldn't be that surprised if he was like really owned, like 20, 25% or something like that, because he is probably still the best play on the board. So I want him in almost all my lineups. I'll tell you that, but I absolutely want to be a little bit underweight in captain, whatever the ownership ends up being. And I just want to get different right away because I think there's a lot of quick opportunities to do that. So moving on, one of the ways to do that is with Ken Walker. He's not going to be 21% owned on this slate, but he's going to carry ownership just because 2 weeks ago we saw what his upside was: 3 touchdowns against the Lions. You loved him then. How are you feeling about him now?
I don't love him as much. I don't really know what they were doing the other day. I think he had 2 rushes at halftime. Finished with only a few. Still played 2/3 of the snaps. So he's on the field. The issue is this is the pass heaviest team in football. I mean, he's going to have the opportunity. Like, he's the goal line guy over Charbonnet, obviously. Charbonnet is more of a pass catching third down type, but not really in love with Kenneth Walker. He would be the chalk I'm going to be under on if the ownership is remotely accurate. I just think there are a lot of ways to get different in this game. If Walker's going to be super chalky, I'm happy to come in under on him.
We are perfectly aligned, my friend, because he did get weirdly 7 catches on 8 targets last week. That was a bit interesting to me. Even though Charbonnet kind of like rotates in and shares the backfield, and especially on third downs sometimes. But yeah, 5 carries in a reasonably close game with the Giants. That is surprising. I'm curious if, maybe he was a little bit nicked up after returning from injury the week before, whatever the case. So either way, I am with you. I do still want to play Kenneth Walker, but I'm going to be way underweight on him in captain and just, in general. We know Seattle likes to throw the ball. in this matchup, the best way to attack the 49ers is through the air. So if the ownership's going to flock to Ken Walker, I will gladly turn away and do other things. And also another talking point with that in mind is the fact that now we can't fully trust this ownership here, but it's also not surprising. Like, I would not be shocked at all if Jordan Mason was the top captain and the highest owned player overall in the slate. And then also that that this game would be 49ers heavy, right? Would you be surprised by that? I highly doubt it.
No, I wouldn't be shocked at all.
Yeah, so I think we're kind of trending in the same area where I think a really good strategy right away is you'll just have to kind of pick your spots and get different how you want to, is to just stack the Seahawks passing game. Whatever that ends up being, whether it be Geno and the captain or what have you, going away from Kenneth Walker, either being underweight or flat out fading if you're doing like a single entry. And then I would still use Jordan Mason for sure, but I'd put him in the flex. So as with that in mind, let's keep going here. As far as like these other 49ers options that are going to get ownership and project pretty well, let's quickly talk about their passing game. You got Deebo Samuel, you have Brock Purdy. Those two are the guys who are coming in with the ownership, but again, don't take that, as gospel. And then trickling down there, you do have Brandon Ayuk and George Kittle. Worth noting, George Kittle is questionable for this game. He's got a rib injury. He was a limited participant in practice. I would imagine he plays, but we should discuss what that could mean if he's limited or out. But yeah, so how are you feeling about the 49ers passing game, and which guys are you most excited to use?
I'm getting to Kittle the most of any of these guys. He's the cheapest of the pass catchers. Obviously him playing is important, but he's cheap. He's actually scoring touchdowns this season. He played over 90% of the snaps each of the last 2 games after missing that one game. I like him quite a bit. I'm getting to Purdy and captain a little bit. The captain I have the most of is Geno in this game. Like I said, it's the pass heaviest offense in the league. He, I think, is leading the league in passing yards. San Francisco, like you said, a little bit more vulnerable against the pass. And I'm not getting to Walker too much. So I'm kind of leaning into that and just hoping for a more kind of pass-heavy game script for Seattle. But Ayuk and Deebo looks like I'm going to be under on in captain at least.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I'm with you. I'm really focusing on a Seahawks stack, and just the other Niners, it's going to be about, who I can afford, like where I'm at with my lineup and exposure and everything. I'd probably be prioritizing the lower owned options, but Deebo, Ayuk, and Kittle all look great. I will note that the Seahawks have allowed the 5th most receiving yards to tight ends, have not allowed a touchdown to tight ends this year, but as we know, that can change in a hurry. So as far as captain plays, if I'm going to switch it up a little bit, Kittle being projecting as a pretty unowned captain is very interesting. Ayuk is only projecting for 2% more ownership than captain. So both of those guys are fine. I don't want to talk anybody away from 49ers plays in general, and specifically in the captain slot, because they look fine. They look like good plays. I just think that's instant leverage to go away from the 49ers and also Kenneth Walker. So over to the Seattle side, let's talk about what we're going to do if we don't end up captaining Geno. So Geno, he's a quarterback, and on Showdown sites, quarterbacks are owned, right? So naturally, whatever the ownership says now, I would imagine that is going to spike, and Geno's going to carry some ownership in the captain slot. So if you want to do this, if you want to target the Seahawks passing game, but you don't want to captain Geno, who are you looking to?
Probably DK would be the first stop. I don't think that's a hot take. Easily the target share leader on this team. Has been fumbling a little bit lately, but I'm not too worried about that. Lockett and JSN is a really hard situation to parse. I'm just fine playing them all, like in a Geno captain lineup. He's more of a traditional quarterback, so I'm more likely to pair him with like at least 3 pass catchers if I'm captaining him. If he has a game that's going to get you to the top in captain, it's pretty likely that at least a couple of those receivers also go off. So just banking on that. We know the targets go to those 3 guys. They don't really do much beyond that. Like the Kenneth Walker thing last week was a bit of an anomaly.
Mm-hmm.
So like I said, I'm pretty under on him, but I'm pretty heavy on everyone in the Seahawks passing game.
Yeah, honestly, I mean, obviously I'm not going to push anybody away from DK. I love DK. One big play, and he can hit for you. I would just imagine that he's going to be the focus, him and Ken Walker, for the 49ers defense. So I personally am looking at JSN. He's my favorite captain play of the entire slate. Obviously, Lockett is still there, and you know DK is going to get some of that target share. Like you said, he has the biggest for Seattle. But because they pass so much, because they're probably going to be playing from behind here, I think taking somebody in the passing game for Seattle does make a lot of sense. It's going to be JSN for me. He's had 7+ targets in 3 of his last 4 games, 13+ fantasy points in all those games where he had 7+ targets. And I would expect him to, push for 10 targets in this game. So if he does that, I think he's absolutely in play at captain. And right now, he does not look like he's going to garner a lot of ownership, even though we can't really fully trust the ownership numbers we're seeing right now. Is JSN going to be more owned than Jordan Mason, Purdy, Geno, Ken Walker, DK? No, he's not. So just by default, he looks like a really, really good tournament play to slide in captain, and obviously a good flex play as well. Let's see here. Who else? Well, you said, I'm sure you'll have a little bit of interest in Tyler Lockett. I'm right there with you. Just not a high priority for me because I prefer JSN, even though the price is a little bit steeper. Let's talk about value. Let's in particular in the flex, and then we can kind of touch on if we are considering sprinkling these guys into the captain as well. One guy would be Juwan Jennings. He's not going to go off for 49 fantasy points because Debo is back and everybody's healthy, but he has still seen 4+ targets in each of the last 2 games. So at 4K flat, I think he's viable. He's definitely in play. You mentioned Zach Charbonnet, cut into Ken Walker's workload a little bit. He had 5 touches last week. I don't know. I think if we have any reason to believe Walker would be limited or something, then I'd have a little bit more interest. I think 3.4 is fine, but I don't love it. Then we're getting into gross territory here. You did say Garendo did have 5 carries last week, so that's something that 2K flat. We can look at him. Kyle Juszczyk, is that how you say his name? Juszczyk. Anyways, check. It's a nightmare. Okay, so 49ers fullback, 1.4K. I'm just going to call it 49ers fullback. He has not had a carry all season, but he can be involved in the passing game. He has had at least 1 catch in 4 of 5 games. Obviously, there is like the very real potential for no points out of him, but at 1.4K, he is on the field for like 80% of snaps, so he's viable. So which of those guys do you have any interest in sliding in the flex? Are any of them captain eligible for you? And are there any other values that are on your radar?
I'm not really looking to captain those guys. There are so many good players in this game that it's pretty easy to get good players in captain that aren't going to be too chalky. So I'm not really deep diving, although there is one I'm kind of taking a stand on as a value captain and in flex, and it's Matthew Wright, the kicker for San Francisco. Jake Moody, unlikely to play in this game. They just made Matthew Wright the same price as him. If you play him in captain, you can pretty much get whatever else you want, and it's the good stuff in the flex spots. San Francisco being favored in this game, I believe, should help him a little bit. He's cheaper than Jason Myers, too, the Seattle kicker. So I'm getting to him a lot. We've seen kickers, for whatever reason, like thrive all season long, especially in showdown slates. He's obviously a relative unknown compared to Jake Moody, but I'm kind of willing to lean into the uncertainty with him and play him a lot.
Yeah, I don't know if I want to captain him, but you are not wrong in that Thursday Night Football, for some reason, is just a really fun spot for kickers. They tend to go off. I will mention Jason Myers is a little bit more reliable, not that much more expensive at 5K flat. He's had 10+ fantasy points in 3 of 5 games and 8+ fantasy points in 4 or 5. So he looks pretty viable. I mean, obviously the 49ers still have a pretty good defense. So, it's entirely possible that the Seahawks get, move the ball enough to get in scoring position, but can't finish the job here. So Myers, honestly, both kickers, I think, are going to be undervalued a little bit. We don't really know anything about the flex ownership yet, but I mean, kickers just routinely are better plays than the field expects them to be, because it's not fun to play kicker because in theory they don't have any upside. But I like them both. I think I'd be a little bit overweight on them. The game total kind of keeps me away from the defenses. If I did play a defense, it would probably be the 49ers. Just because I feel like San Francisco is going to be a little bit more desperate. I mean, I don't know how you can say the Seahawks aren't desperate, because this will be their 3rd straight loss in a row if they do end up losing. But I just think the 49ers are going to come out with a little bit more energy and possibly control this game. So if you want to play defense, I would be a little bit overweight on the 49ers. As for other values, so if what?
The only true punt that looks somewhat playable is Bobo, just because he gets on the field a bit. He gets a few targets. Like, he might get one catch, but he's 1K in the flex, so I don't mind that.
I think, I was going to mention Bobo just because he's 1K, and in 4 of 5 games, he's played 20 to 30% of the snaps. But I think last week it dipped to like 3% because Lockett is healthy and JSN is there. So
they've been there all season.
Well, Lockett's been banged up though. So I think Lockett's snap percentage has been kind of inconsistent because he's not really 100%. I think now he is though. So I'm wondering if that would be like basically a death sentence for Bobo. But at 1K flat, he's there. He's their 4th guy. So if they're going to roll out 4 or 5 wide receiver sets at any point, I mean 1K flat, slide him in there. He's not going to be owned just because he's not super productive, and people are going to also pay attention to snap count too. So I think he's viable. Eric Saubert, if Kittle is randomly out, obviously he would be kind of a priority in the flex at only $600. And even if Kittle's in, I think at 600 as a direct backup to Kittle, I think we can consider him, just not getting crazy exposure there. I don't really see anybody else that I absolutely have to have. There's a couple other tight ends that would be elevated and possibly play like 25 to 30% of snaps if Kittle were to miss this game. Doesn't really seem like Kittle's at a major risk to be out, so I don't really want to put too much stock in that. I will. One other guy that is an interesting value would be AJ Barner. Noah Fant is fine at 3K flat. I mean, that's a good flex value because he's going to play a good chunk of the time for Seahawks at tight end, but he just does not have a ceiling. And he's got a low floor. So if you're like already considering playing him and you can't quite get to like the other dude that you want in flex or captain, you can save 1.4K and go play Barner, who is getting like 25% of snaps right now. And he did score a touchdown 2 weeks ago and has had at least 1 catch in 3 straight games. I mean, you could do a lot worse for 1.6K, So I think Barner might be my favorite value play to slide in at flex. I don't want to captain him because the floor and ceiling are both incredibly low. But I mean, right now, this is where my lineup stands, just like a mock lineup before I actually like enter in player exposures, just the way I hand built it. JSN in my captain, Gino to complete the stack. Go get DK as well, because that's okay. We want to eat some chalk because they're chalky for a reason. Jordan Mason chalk is good chalk to me. And then Debo, I don't know how chalky Debo is going to be. You can kind of fluctuate there, Debo or Ayuk. If Ayuk's going to be less owned, I'm fine with going to Debo. And then I'm wrapping it up with Barner just because he's going to be out there, an okay amount. And I think he's a viable punt. So is there anybody else in that range or like any other punts that you think help, piece everything together to get you the team you really, really want?
Not really. I'm just kind of over on the kickers just because they are the value pieces that look the best. And the super mega punts all have floors of 0. Obviously the kickers do too, but less likely to give you a 0. So not really messing a lot with Barner, Bobo, use check, guys like that.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, if you can help it, you don't have to go get Bobo and Barner and Garendo and just like basically roll the dice and hope that these guys have bigger roles than they have proven to, be having through 5 weeks. Then that is suggested. The only issue is you don't want to just be like eating up a ton of chalk and not getting different at all. So one way to do that is to get different in the captain slot. And I think that is obviously with the ownership so concentrated we don't know for sure, but right now it looks like it's Mason and Walker soaking up a ton of the ownership. Really, you could play whoever you want. Just don't play those 2 guys in the captain, right?
Especially not Walker. I'm okay with Mason, but Walker seems like a fade for me.
Yep. All right. So that is going to do it for us. I think we covered just about everything as far as our top plays, some value picks we like, and our personal strategy. So, okay, before I wrap it up, you did say you kind of like the 49ers kicker Matthew Wright in the captain. Is that like currently your main approach? Is he like in the highest in one of your lineups in the captain, or like what's your overall general strategy going into Thursday night?
Mostly Geno. Geno's my favorite captain, and then playing all the receivers with him. Like, I just think that makes a lot of sense. I'll have the kicker a decent amount in captain, but he's going to come in behind guys like Mason, Kittle, and Purdy in all likelihood. So it's not I don't feel the need to like dump 25% of my lineups into the kicker and captain. Like, I think maybe 10% might be enough to get north of the field on that. So I'll do it a little bit, but Geno by far is my favorite captain.
All right, sounds good. And we're both kind of Seahawks heavy in general, which I think is just naturally the right approach on a slate that feels like it's going to be very 49ers heavy. That is going to do it for us. Hopefully this helps you out. If it does, give this video a like and also subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching and good luck.